Alright, so today I want to make a video updating everyone as usual and then get into some other stuff. Again, as usual, there's some big stories going on, a lot of stuff to talk about. So getting right into it, and like the first thing I would mention is that I'm very close to just not even acknowledging this stuff anymore, like at least the case totals, because we're at the point to where if we haven't got there already, we're very close to it being so blatantly obvious that we should be opened that it's not even worth acknowledging things because the active cases are going down by 100, 150 cases a day for at least the last week. Um, I mean, in Toronto, or it's not Toronto, in Ontario, they had the least amount of daily cases yesterday since March, which we're talking 6 weeks ago. So, and not to mention too, they've probably quadrupled the amount of tests being done since then. So the actual percent of positives is as low as they've probably ever had. So that's the other thing to recognize too. People saying, "Oh, we're still getting 650, 60 cases a day, probably 50 we've been averaging." But what they're not telling you is that we've tripled the amount of tests we've been we when we first started, we were doing maybe 1-2,000 tests a day. Now we're doing 4-5,000 a day. And again, the more people you test, the more you're going to discover because a lot of people are asymptomatic or have very um, mild symptoms. So they'll probably think they may very well think it's just a cold, or they may very well just not even care, being like, I'm not in the I'm healthy, I'm young, I don't have anything to worry about. I'll just stay home and I'll be good to go. So that's the one thing to acknowledge. So if you look at it as a you know per capita or whatever you want to call it based off tests, we're actually the equivalent to having like 20, 30 cases a day, um, compared to like 6 weeks ago. So that's one thing to point out. Anyway, Canada's up to 71,548 cases, 5,211 dead. Alberta has just 1,211 cases. Yesterday, I believe, or sorry, active cases. Um, Yesterday, I believe, were around 1,350. So again, at least 100 people more a day are recovering than are actually getting it, it seems. We're down to 11 people in the ICU. Again, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like, I've been pointing it out forever and ever, but I'm going to keep doing it because people still don't seem to understand too, is that um, the whole point of this was to not overwhelm the hospitals. We have 11 people in the ICU. That is the furthest thing. I mean, I don't know how many ICU beds we have in Alberta, but my guess is we have at least 100. I'd be surprised if we, again, I have no idea, but I would imagine we would have at least 100. Um, we probably have more than 11 in a handful of hospitals, like individual hospitals. Again, we still have had 120 people die. So again, the whole point, and the thing to point out too is that it's at the point where I think a lot more people are catching on. The problem is the Karens of the world, like the keep it locked down or we're all gonna die crowd, are the people that make their voice heard the most. Most people I talk to who are kind of not super political, or gung ho when it comes to this kind of stuff, are people that want to go back to normal. I think I've hardly talked to anyone in person or online that I know that is more apolitical, that doesn't want to go back. But you talk to the uber political, largely left leaning crowd, where we need to keep it locked down or we're all going to die crowd. And the reason they want to keep things locked down, I mean, there's many reasons. Number one is that when you're on the left, a good economy or a bad economy is a good thing. This is one of the many advantages of being on the left, is that if the economy is good, you can take credit, take it as, oh, well, the economy is doing good because of us. If it's doing bad, it's because, oh, we need more government, we need more socialism. So that's why the left wants this, is that it's going to be an excuse for more socialism and more government power. A lot of people are not going to have jobs coming out of this. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs coming out of this because of such a poor economy. And the government solution to it, my guess, especially if Justin Trudeau is still in power, which he most likely will be, is, oh, we need to bring in a UBI, or we need to expand unemployment, or whatever they'll do. Um, and just the fact that they're giving young people so much more money than older people just goes to show that all they care about is getting reelected. I think that they know that they're kind of teetering on the edge of not getting reelected because they're so unpopular, because the economy was doing so bad even before this, because of all the scandals. But their solutions, hey, let's just buy off young people. They'll be voting for us for the next 50 years. Old people will be lucky to get one or two election cycles out of them, so who cares about them? Again, which just flies in the face of, if you want to reopen things, you hate old people argument. Um, for the simple reason that who do you think um, who do you think needs more money to live, comfortably? Someone who's like 60, 70, in like their 60s or 70s, or someone who's in college? I mean, there's probably not that big of a difference, but if you're in college, you can more than likely go live with your parents, and live close to, if not rent free. But if you're old, I mean, maybe you have pension, but you still have expenses, especially if you're not retired yet. So that's the one thing to point out. So, and again, I don't think anybody should be getting an insane amount of money. I think at the very least, let's just have it be consistent. I mean, if it was up to me, the economy would have been open long ago, and we wouldn't have to be worrying about this mess. But anyway, this is from Sticks Hex and Hammer 666, and again, he puts it very good here. So he says, remember, if you don't want to be a jobless, paranoid slave and allow limitless surveillance and tracking of all human beings worldwide and suppress all commerce eternally, you're a terrorist who wants to kill people's grandparents and hates kids too and kicks puppies. And like I say, that's a very good way of putting it. That these people, they no longer have an argument. They keep it locked down. We're all gonna die. Crowd no longer has an argument, so they're having to resort to crap like this. And it's very sad that it's gotten to this, but like I say, in the States at least, they want to keep the economy bad because that was how Trump had so much support. And again, most Canadians are completely oblivious to it, even a lot of right wingers. The economy was doing pretty good I mean, compared to Canada, not compared to an actual really, really good economy, because a lot of the numbers are you know, massaged a little bit, made to look better than they actually are. But we do that too in Canada. The state's unemployment rate was like 2.5% lower than Canada. Median wages were actually starting to go up a little bit, not in Canada, of course. So, again, compared to Canada, the economy was doing very good. And Trump's approval rating was definitely good enough to get reelected. Again, contrary to a lot of people here, they'll pick out one BS CNN poll, whereas, his approval rating is like 5% lower than the actual average. And they'll be like, see, Trump sucks. He's not going to get reelected. He's an orange man bad, all that crap. But what they don't tell you is that in the aggregate, which is the only thing that really matters, again, you could easily pick out a specific poll that makes them look 5-10% better than the average as well. So that's the one thing to point out there. But again, this is where we're at too. That this virus is not, it's been completely overblown. Like, this isn't the doomsday. This isn't the doomsday virus. This isn't the Black Plague. This is something that's slightly the exact same as the flu, pretty much, for the majority of the population. And if you're older, you can just stay home. I mean, you're probably not working anyway, quarantine. And if you are, well, we'll figure something out around that. I don't believe that because a very small percent of the population is feels unsafe or, paranoid, that we have to cater to their paranoia. We don't cater to an incredibly small percent of the population for anything else, but when it comes to this, we do for some reason. And the thing to point out too is that these people are just useful idiots for government. The government wants to grab more power to enrich themselves, to help out their corporate buddies. And again, don't tell me, oh, it's just the right wingers. No, everybody does that. Like, come on, like, look at Trudeau with SNC Lavalin, with the UN, with China, with all these kind of people. Of course, he's getting kickbacks from them. And not only that, he forces the taxpayers to renovate his house, even though the guy's probably got a net worth well in the millions of dollars. Um, so don't give me that crap. Not to mention, too, right-wing politicians tend to be held to a much higher standard. And I don't see how, I mean, people will debate that, but I don't think there's any debate of that, for the simple reason that, again, you look in the States, um, people think that Donald Trump's some pervy guy who's, done stuff to women, when there's literally no evidence of that whatsoever. Um, and yet we have a guy who there's clearly at least some evidence point, and I mean, there's stuff that he's done on camera that's clearly inappropriate. Now, you may not consider it sexual assault, but clearly inappropriate, that's also running for president, and no one really seems to have a problem with that on the left. So clearly there's a different standard that right-wing politicians are held to. But like I said, this is something that should be pointed out that um, and not to mention too, a lot of these people are people that are making just as much money not working as working. Like most of these, social justice warrior people working a minimum wage job at Starbucks, they're making just as much money not working as working. So this is one of the main reasons why they want to keep things going. Even though, like I say, there's no evidence that the lockdowns work too. People make this argument, oh, you have to admit that the lockdowns do prevent the spread, which I would say they do, but it's such a small degree that it doesn't matter. Like I pointed out the case the other day, New York State tested people and they found that 2/3 of people who test positive are people that were self-quarantining, which means that it doesn't work. It doesn't work. If anything, it maybe prevents the spread the slightest degree. And you're telling me that maybe having like rather than having 5,000 dead in Canada, we'd have 5,500. Do those people do the 500 lives matter more than the millions that are unemployed? Then the more than likely, I guarantee you, there'll be more than 500 people die from suicide from this, misdiagnosed cancer or too late diagnosed cancer, people that commit suicide down the road because their parents are so stressed out. Maybe they're abusing them. Maybe because they're dirt poor, they won't ever get a good job because now again people are going to lose their houses and all this kind of stuff. So again, that's not an argument. The people that say though the lockdowns do help though, again, not an argument. If anything, there's evidence that it may not even do literally anything, which I'll get to, but at the most it does a very slight difference. So two things happened yesterday, according to this, or sorry, from this, in that number one, Brian Adams was mad that he can't do his concert, and he blamed China. No, he was right. Again, people, I don't understand this too. Like he's right because of the Chinese government completely botching this whole situation. Again, it may not even have been botched. It may have been intentional. We don't know, but at the very least, it is gross incompetence, and at worst, it is intentionally releasing a bioweapon upon the world. So there's no way they're innocent. It's either manslaughter or it's first degree murder. Which one do you prefer? So he has every right to be mad too, like every right. And criticizing him is stupid. Like criticizing him is stupid because he's right. And again, I don't care about his politics. I don't even know what side of the spectrum he's on. My guess is that if he's criticizing the communist Chinese, he's probably not on the left, but I don't care where he is. He's right to criticize them, and he can't do his concert because of them. That's a fact. There's no debating that. So the other thing that came out with China was Justin Trudeau's allowing the Chinese to come into Canada to test vaccines, and that is a monumentally terrible, terrible idea. Like I said, I don't know how anybody could possibly argue how that's a good idea. I really don't. Like, it's not like, has there been any reason to distrust the Chinese over the last 6 months or so? Gee, it's almost like there's a reason that we shouldn't trust China, that that they've done over the past 6 months, that we shouldn't trust them for. It's almost like there's a good reason. Um, Obviously being sarcastic, but again, like I say, it's absolutely insane. And like I say, I don't know what goes through Justin Trudeau's mind. I'd really like to know exactly the whole story, like just how infiltrated is he, just how in the pocket of China is he. Like I'd really like to find out, but we probably never will. But it'd be nice to know. Um, so this is from Alan Tumulty, and he says another graph from Tony Heller showing all death totals from Sweden who haven't locked down. Note that there hasn't been any more deaths than the average. Again, so they take the average amount of dead from January 1st to April 15th, from 2015 to 2020, and the amount dead is almost exactly um, within the average. Again, it's actually slightly lower, but it's almost exactly the average. So this just goes to show that the Swedish model of not completely locking things down worked. You can say, oh, the death rate's slightly higher than the average, all this BS, but again, um, you're preventing a lot of other deaths by doing this, right? So a lot less people are dying of car accidents, a lot less people are dying from, working on the job. If you work a dangerous job, I mean, car accidents would be the main one. less people are being diagnosed or dying from other causes, basically. So slightly more people are dying from the virus, but less people are dying from the other causes. So again, it just goes to show that the lockdowns do not work. Like I say, the debate on the lockdowns is, do they not work whatsoever, or do they work to a very small degree? And this is the problem that they keep it locked down or we're all going to die crowd thinks, is that they think that it has a significant impact on the amount of outbreak and the amount of dead, and it doesn't. That's not true, and stuff like this just proves that. Stuff like the 2/3 of people infected in New York were self-quarantining proves that kind of stuff. If the lockdowns work, then why isn't a very small percentage of people testing positive people who are self-quarantining? I think one of the main things for that is people don't believe the hype anymore. People are going out. People are going out with their friends. I mean, maybe not in massive groups, but they're still doing this kind of stuff. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here is Tanzania basically was getting suspicious about their boost in virus cases. So they basically tested a goat, a papaya, and I'm not going to read the whole article here because it's pretty long. But like I said, they tested a goat, a papaya, and some other thing. And they found that and then they sent it into the lab. They put like a human's name and age and everything on there, and they came back positive. So what's going on there? And we already know that the amount of cases and the amount of dead is an inflated number. We know that from New York. The state of Pennsylvania reduced their total by about 200 a couple of weeks back. So we know that there's a lot of people testing positive that don't actually have the virus. So again, that's a very telling story. It's very significant, something you should definitely look into and read into. And again, it's just all the more evidence going to show that this is completely overblown. There's no evidence that has came out over the last couple weeks that this is underblown, like none. So anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. I've gone on long enough. So if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on BitChute. Everything's in the description, so just go check it out there.